Well, to discuss that story a bit further, we're now joined by Mr. Dennis Halliday, who is the former UN Assistant Secretary General, who's joining us now on the line from New York. Sir, thanks a lot for joining us now. How do we come to terms with the fact that the United States has called for dialogue and yet brings in these sanctions?
Well, it sends, in my view, very, very confused signals to the people of Iran. You know that I spent time in Iraq overseeing the Oil for Food program under sanctions. So I'm very much familiar with the consequences of sanctions on the people of Iraq and those of the lower income group.